we started thinking about how to beat this incident form matter. And we did it in two ways. First, we introduced the facial. That if your fingerprint doesn't work, there is also the facial biometric. And the only way the two can fail, particularly the facial, is where the voter forgets his face at home and comes to the polling unit without a face. But secondly, we also got the National Assembly to amend the law to make electronic accreditation of voters mandatory. If the fingerprint fails and the facial fails, the voter can't vote. And so you have a situation where there will be no incident form in the elections. And that's why some people are so interested in the BVAS for all the negative reasons, because they know the role of the BVAS in that respect.
There are a few more sound bites from the INEC chairman, which will trigger and inspire conversation. Let me introduce the panel tonight. Mr. Osaze Uzi, Oluwole Osaze Uzi, was a former director of voter education with INEC. Thank you so much indeed for coming tonight. And in fact, let me say that he's a senior, one of senior lawyers in this country. And Mr. Jide Ojo is a columnist and a political analyst. Thank you so much, Mr. Ojo, for coming. Now, I was laying a background about the history of elections in the country, from the days of FEDECO to FEC to INEC and all of that. And even in recent past, from 1998 up until 2007, those were days that you say they were the dark ages in election development in Nigeria. But Mr. Uzi, the Electoral Law 2000, Electoral Act 2022, how much of a circle is it giving to election in Nigeria, and what hopes do you think it holds for 2023 election?
Thank you. The determinants of credible election rests a great deal on the legal framework. And while a good legal framework does not guarantee credible elections, if you don't have a good legal framework, you know that the elections are not likely to be credible. So the starting point is, what is the legal framework that you have? And a legal framework that gives you certain basic guarantees ensures that the people who go to the polls, their votes will be counted, and results will get some fidelity to what the people said. Then once those guarantees are there, you know that the elections are bound to be credible. And so the 2022 Electoral Act is a marked improvement on previous electoral acts, and it's also a byproduct of a lot of the shortcomings we saw on the field, which were exploited by the political class in doing what they did. For example, in 2015, the card reader was introduced and was used, and but people were not happy that the way the Supreme Court handled the issue of the validity of the use of the card reader. Of course, the Supreme Court was right in the general scheme of things. They look, if you want that, it's a good technological device, it's a good thing, it will improve the process, but you must go and put it in the law. The courts don't make laws. The legislature has the constitutional responsibility of making laws. So whatever you want in the law, put in the law. We, the courts, will interpret the thing. So learning from that, for example, went back and said, look, let us go and put card reader in thing. I remember the discussions between INEC and the National Assembly. So please don't use card reader. Technology is dynamic. Today is card reader. In fact, by the time the law was being considered, INEC had moved ahead away from card reader to the BVAS. Z-Pad in between. And just to show you how organic the thing is. Yeah. The Z-Pad didn't last too long, but we now saw a better thing. And who knows, maybe in 2 years' time or 1 year's time, there might even be better devices. I don't know, but...
In fact, today, the INEC chairman at that event was saying the developers, I mean, interesting, this is a good news, that the developers of that device were Nigerians. They were not Indians, they were not Americans. They were, although it was coupled outside of the country. Yes. But it's the fact that it was put together, it was innovated in Nigeria. And also, he said they wanted to go as far as using body odors of individuals to determine, after using their fingerprints, their biometrics, their facial recognition. In fact, they wanted to add the body odor to be distinct, so that nobody can steal anybody's identity, because identity theft is one major step in rigging election.
It's real.
So, I mean, let me ask, before I go to Mr. Ojo, Would you say that election is now difficult to rig in Nigeria?
Election rigging, as we used to know it, is extremely difficult. But that is not to rule out rigging completely. But with the way this system is, INEC is one step ahead of the election riggers, those engaged in malpractices. But there are other forms of rigging which technology may not, for example, voter inducement, which technology itself might not immediately address.
Capture, yeah.
It might not immediately capture. But going forward, there are other ways that might be checkmated. But yes, it's extremely difficult to rig in the formal sense. But with the deployment of technology, there are also issues of cybersecurity and other things that those who intend to subvert the process might start thinking about. But fortunately, I am aware that INEC is way ahead in terms of that, countermanding them.
I'll ask Mr. Ojo the same question. For you, you watch what happened, because there was something that was happening when we were live in Ekiti, for example, and there were those who were saying, they're already rigging in our polling, but we said, oh, the result is already with us, yeah. No matter what they have, I mean, the ones in INEX portal is one that stands. How difficult do you think, or how easy is it to rig election in this country now?
Okay, now it will be challenging for the political class, but don't also underrate the ingenuity of the special breed of political class that we have. And what my elder here failed to mention, or what I would take as a rider to what he said, is that INEC alone cannot guarantee credible election. There are 9 stakeholders that are involved in the electoral process who needs to work in sync for there to be credible, free, fair, inclusive, participatory election. And I'll quickly run through them, even though time may not permit us to go into the role of each and every one of them. He talked about the electoral law. Who implements the electoral law? Largely is the electoral management body. But what about security agents? What role? Are they going to be complicit, or are they going to be professional? He alluded to the issue of voter inducement. Is it INEC that will run after those who are engaged in voter inducement, or is it the security agencies? How ready are they to give the support? What about the courts? Many cases are in courts, making INEC's work difficult. You see the controversy over Yobe North, who is the candidate, who is not the candidate, in Akwa Ibom, in Ebonyi, and all of that. INEC cannot descend into the fray. But campaigns are about to start. INEC has left those places blank because the court has not made the final pronouncement. So the court has a role, security agencies has a role, the media that sets the agenda. Who are the people peddling or who aid in peddling of fake news, hate speech, and all manner of misinformation and disinformation? The media has a role to play there, even though majority of this could be on the social media. But we also know the partisan nature of the Nigerian media, given the ownership structure. Then you look at the civil society organization. You look at the electorate themselves, who are pliable, who are ready to be induced, or who will even ask you for inducement for them to vote. A party is saying, we know they give shishi. Fine, you know they give shishi, but let's see whether on the field, if you don't give shishi, whether you win. So I'm not saying that is the ideal, but I'm saying, given the cultural nuance of Nigeria's electorate, and what played out in Osun, what played out in Ekiti, you know, what played out in Anambra?
We had an argument in the studio, in our election studio, where 2 parties were arguing who paid the highest or who paid more. It wasn't a case of we did not pay. It was a case of
who paid more.
So, I mean, like Mr. Ozazewuzi said, that voter inducement, I mean, vote buying looks like you're selling tomatoes and onions, but it's inducement in the real sense.
Section 121, Section 127 of the electoral is very clear. It's both the giver and the taker that are complicit. And the punishment goes to the two. But, okay, let's run quickly apart from the electorate, the National Assembly that makes the law, you know the vigilance, civil society, and the media have to put to ensure that those salient provisions that we are celebrating today even made it into the law. Mm-hmm. Today, there are provisions that could have helped further to give credible elections that are in the Constitution, which has not seen the light of the day. How many months to the election? So there are 9 different stakeholders who needs to work in sync with the electoral management body at the apex, and with their support, then things will move very swiftly. Then we can backslap and say, yes, we delivered. But if you leave INEC alone, or INEC as my elder will call it, if you leave INEC to do the job and all the other stakeholders stand aloof and did not give the kind of, look at what Yaga Africa is doing, the kind of investment, even from development sector, the development partners, we call them, the USAIDs of this world, the European Unions of this world, the UK of this world. If we do away with their support, what Yaga is doing, what IFA is doing, what Albino Foundation is doing, many of them would be a drain on their individual purses.
There's this aspect that I'd like us to touch on. So we're looking at how we can make it better, the 2023 election. A lot of people, Mr. Osazeuzi, I remember that when elections are over, votings are over, we usually bring him to the studio and say, look, it is not yet over, because the critical, in fact, politicians at the time wait for when it is getting late. That is when they act. That is when their own jobs really begin. And they go after the result, they push the result papers into the water.
And they are very critical. In fact, I forgot to mention that they are even more critical after INEC. You have the political party and the candidates coming in descending order. Once you pick INEC, you pick political parties, you pick candidates, and then you go down the lane with the electorate at the very back. So this 8 line have to work together
to ensure. I want to listen to what Professor Yakubu said. I'd like to get Mr. Osazuzi's comment on what he said. This part is about the BVAS and going forward in our elections.
Perhaps the most important technological tool introduced by the Commission in recent times is the bimodal voter accreditation system, the BVAS, and the INEC result viewing portal, the IREV. While the BVAS is a device, the IREV is a web portal. But they have worked together to strengthen results collation and tremendously increase public confidence in the quality of elections in Nigeria. The smart carried the accredited voters using the fingerprint. And then they argued that, oh, if it doesn't work, no voter should be disenfranchised. Why don't you introduce something else? The commission had to bend over backwards to introduce the incident form. And so people started voting using identity theft. Because the machine will read any card configured to any polling unit. But it can't read the biometrics for as long as the person who presents the card is not the actual owner.
All right. Musa Uze, what is the gap that we need to look out for? From what INEC chairman has said, the BVAS is there, the IREV is there. But what other gaps do we need to look out for and work against ahead of the election?
I don't think for this purpose, in terms of accreditation and voting, there are any serious gaps, quite honestly. Because if you're not recognized by the BVAS, either through your fingerprints or through facial recognition, then you will not be allowed to vote. And that may sound worrisome to some people and say, how we sure technology will work. But I understand the BVAS has about 99.9% accuracy. And it's a higher percentage when you think that it is the second. That's why it's bimodal. There are 2 types. First of all, your fingerprints, which then used to have about 97% accuracy. And then now you have this that has over 99%. So between both, it's highly, highly unlikely that anybody who's name appears on the register will not have the opportunity to vote.
Because what people usually do is that they buy people's PVCs.
Yes.
They take it off them, give them money,
Yes.
and they use it on election day. So this might be difficult.
Well, there are two ways. They can use them on election day, or they can, prior to now, but almost impossible. You cannot use them because you must be authenticated. The BVAS records each person who comes for accreditation, and it must be the actual owner of the card. And this data is transmitted. This data is there because, and don't forget that the Electoral Act has now redefined or designated overvoting, and it will depend on the total number of people who were accredited by BVAS, not by the indiscriminate ticking on the register. So electronically, that is there, and I'm aware that that figure will be transmitted. So people, the INEC will know that. So the returning officer will see this, and so that if the total number of ballot papers used for the election exceeds the total number of people accredited, and there are no incident forms, as it says, then there's a problem. That
you can't manufacture.
That's nullified.
Yeah. So, and one of the other areas is that people announce result under duress. That has been laid to rest because the court actually blamed INEC. You can't withhold people's certificate of return because of this reason. But it's now clear in the Electoral Act that any result announced under duress, INEC has the prerogative to review the situation and make a decision. Also, the Electoral Act is now very clear that you must paste the result on the wall. Yeah. And this is very important, isn't it?
They are very important. And first of all, the old act says, look, once a result has been declared, the only way of challenging it is to go and file an election petition. It's very clear. And INEC said, well, we don't have to give you a certificate of return. And at least 2 senators from Imo, specifically in that one, now used different methods to get in there. And INEC withheld their certificates, but they went to court and said, look, it's strict interpretation of what the law says. It's a different thing that it's not desirable, but that's what the law says. So that has been amended. So the INEC now has a right where it's under duress or where it's in contrary to the INEC regulations and the Electoral Act. And if, for example, if you forge a certificate and bribed the returning officer to make a return where it shouldn't have, because prior to now, the returning officer's decision was final. End of matter.
Let me tell you, your own view on this.
Well, yes, it's a welcome development again, considering the fact that this is an electoral law that was well fought for. I think a lot is expected of INEC to live up to expectation as the lead agency in the conduct of this election. But a number of things I would say the Commission needs to strengthen. Recently, there are controversies about what mode of transmission would the election follows. Section 50 sub 2 of the Electoral 2022 actually leave that discretion to INEC to deploy whatever solution they want to use at the discretion of the Commission. But, issue of manual collation and electronic transmission, many people hasn't even observed that, that the law still allows INEC to do manual collation. You don't just send polling unit results and tabulate, The stages of collation still remains as it used to be, from polling units to ward level, from ward level to local government level, from local government to state, and from state to the final in the presidential election. What needs to be done majorly now is the public enlightenment about the salient provision of this electoral act, so that all of us stakeholders will be on the same page. I challenged the Commission to do specific sensitization on how a winner emerges in an election. That the fact that your loyalist or your preferred candidate wins at your polling unit, at your ward, at your local government, at the state, does not mean he is going to be the next president. Right. Because there are thresholds that has to be met. Majority of valid vote cast, as well as 2/3 of valid votes in the entire country, which means 24 states.
Are you optimistic about 2023 election?
Very, 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 very.
What about you, Mr.
Certainly am.
And I hope that you are too, because it is very critical to our democracy, and we all need to do our best to ensure that we go out all, when you have the opportunity to. You must actually get the opportunity to get your PVC if you are over 18 years and you are in the country. Maybe sometime later, those who are outside of the country may be able to vote. But at this 2023 election, the law says you must be on the shores of Nigeria. I must sincerely thank both of you for coming. Very insightful conversations on this election. Thank you indeed, Mr. Jideojo and Mr. Oluwole Osaze-Uzi. But that's our show for tonight, everyone. I'll see you again on Sunday at 8 p.m. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Sean Kimale. Bye-bye.